Good morning. You're watching Business World Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's 10:30 a.m. this Tuesday morning here in Manila. We are about 1 hour into this trading day. Let's go straight to our banner. Analysts, business leaders, and opposition lawmakers believe President Duterte failed to detail revival plans for an economy that has been heavily battered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Malacanang had earlier said the president would unveil the COVID-19 recovery roadmap in his penultimate SONA, but the president did not go into the nitty-gritty of things. Instead, he asked lawmakers to pass stimulus measures to revive the economy that is on the brink of a recession caused by a lockdown that is one of the world's strictest and longest. He called on lawmakers to fast-track the passage of the Bayanihan 2, which would let him allocate another 140 billion pesos for various health programs. The first law that has since expired allowed the president to realign 275 billion pesos. That's for the COVID-19 response program. In a speech that lasted for nearly 2 hours, the president cautioned against fully reopening the economy to pre-pandemic levels, saying the good would be outweighed by the bad it will generate as he points to the rising infections. The country has so far logged over 82,000 COVID-19 cases. At one point in his SONA, President Duterte said he pleaded with Chinese President Xi Jinping, that's a few days ago, to prioritize the Philippines once Beijing finds a COVID-19 vaccine. The president also asked Congress to fast-track the approval of the bill seeking to lower corporate income taxes to 25% from the current 30%. The president also vowed to help MSMEs affected by the lockdowns. PhilExport President Sergio Ortiz Luis says the business community wanted to hear the details of the stimulus measures, especially for small businesses. Ortiz Luis specifically wanted the president to discuss the Arise bill. This is a stimulus package that seeks to earmark 1.3 trillion pesos for mass testing, wage subsidies, and aid for small companies. The business community earlier released a so-called wish list asking for stimulus measures and legislation that will open the country to more foreign direct investments. British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Executive Director Chris Nelson said he was looking forward to the budgets that would be allotted to specific sectors under the 140 billion peso Bayanihan 2 bill. University of the Philippines political science professor Maria Ella Atienza believes that the president presented a few good points, but these were drowned out when he talked about the war on drugs and when he attacked the opposition Senator Franklin Drilon for supposedly defending the Lopezes. Albay Representative Edsel Lagman says the president's address left a, quote, big hole, unquote, in the overall response to the pandemic. Opening the markets now with some good news, because despite all of the things that we are seeing, we are actually seeing the peso strengthening. That's after the penultimate State of the Nation address of President Duterte. You can see it now at 49.189, really breaching, downwards to breaking the 49 level here. This is actually after we had already seen it soar into a 3-year high even before this speech. So this has strengthened even further. Some analysts are actually saying that this has something to do with the dollar weakening rather than the peso actually strengthening, or this linked to our economic fundamentals. There's a lot of stimulus that might be on the table, and the Fed will be meeting this week over in the US. But let's take a quick peek at our local index right now, because that is in focus as we actually see our index, or the PSEi, slumping to 5842.29. That is in the first hour of trade. That's down 0.3%. Although I do have to say that's paring back the losses that we had seen earlier at 9:30. That actually slumped much lower than that, down by 0.7%. But this is already extending the losses we've seen. This is the sixth straight day. If we do close in the red, this will be the sixth straight day in the red. And of course, a lot of investors reacting to the SONA. Yesterday, we had already ended at an 8-week low. So we did see the virus cases surging above 80,000 levels. The government had been saying that they're looking at the 85,000 mark, and this will be determining whether or not lockdowns might be reimposed, at least in the capital. And we had seen the fifth straight day of losses yesterday. That's the longest stretch of losses we've seen since February February. Now, Jonathan Ravelos of BDO is saying it's exactly that, the fear of rising infections leading to a possible other lockdown, which the economy cannot afford. And Claire Alviar, she is of PhilStocks, is saying that because of these cases and ahead of the possibility of another lockdown, investors had already exited earlier on. Now, financials had led the downturn yesterday. That was sold off by 4.3% in just one day, and three of five of the most actively stocks yesterday were all the financials. They're also very low trades. Value turnover just at 3.9 billion pesos. Foreigners ballooning in terms of the exodus. Net inflows of foreigners surging to 1 billion pesos. But I want to take a very quick peek at the telco space because this is what is in focus this morning. Recall that President Duterte during his SONA had warned the incumbent companies, and that is of course Globe and PLDT, to improve their services by December, facing the risk of a government takeover or a closure if they do not do so. And actually during the open, you could see PLDT slumping by as much as 3.6%. Globe had slumped by almost the same level, really. Now it's paring back the losses. You can see PLDT trading down by 1.5%. Globe as well, 1.6%. But take a look at Dito Telecom, which is the supposed or so-called third telco player, that has surged by 6% in just one day of 1 hour of trading today. And we actually saw that rising by 8.3% during the open. Now, Globe has since released a statement reacting to the president's comments, saying that they're heeding the President Duterte's call to improve their services. They're citing significant investment in network expansion, and they are hoping that a pact with the government will enable faster construction of telco towers and more robust connectivity. Now, another sector that we need to be looking out for here is the financial space, because there are a lot of comments as well regarding the banks that President Duterte had addressed during his SONA. He did mention that he wants to fast track a bill that will allow the banks to manage their bad loans, and he did reiterate the need for banks to extend, let's say, the payment terms for the MSMEs. And one other thing that we need to watch out for are the earnings that have been breaking. And there is the biggest bank, of course, BDO, and that had reported yesterday already a 79% drop in its first half net income as they hike their loan loss provision. So you could see on your screens here, their second quarter net loss was 4.5 billion pesos of a loss. That's versus the 10.4 billion pesos of a profit that they had seen in the same period of last year. And this actually brings the net income in the first half. So they're still in the positive territory when you take the full half year. That's still at 4.3 billion pesos. But nevertheless, that is down 79% from the first half of 2019. And again, this on the back of provisions, which are now around 20 billion pesos set aside for the bad loans that might possibly happen over the quarter. Now, this is the first loss that BDO has seen in a decade, so in 10 years, and the NPL ratio is now standing at close to 2%. But what they are saying is that they had recognized these provisions up front, and that would allow the bank to now focus on the business, growing the business amid all of these restrictions. Because if you do take a look at the rest of their financial standing, their net loans actually were up 7%. So there's still a lot of growth there, 11% growth in customer loans and 9% growth in terms of deposits. So it's not all bad. It's just the fact that they had, of course, put in these provisions ahead of time. Now, another one to be watching out for here is Union Bank. Same losses as well for Union Bank, but they have mentioned that again, it's all because of the provisions. Now, Union Bank has set aside 7 billion pesos in provisions for the first half of the year. But if you take a look at the revenues, and you're seeing that on your screens here, for the first half of the year, take this, revenues up by 55% for Union Bank. That's 22.1 billion pesos in revenues, bringing its first half net income to 4.5 billion pesos, down 6% year on year for that first half. But nevertheless, it's actually the same level as the giant BDO. So same level of net income for the first half of the year. They did mention interest income surging and growing by 41% in terms of their net interest income, and a lot of trading gains here, 86% up for other income. Their loan growth sustained by segments like consumer was up by 33%. A lot of things going on here. One thing that I want to highlight here in terms of the banks is the Banco Central mentioning that banks have actually tightened lending standards amid the lockdown. So you're going to be seeing on my terminal here how the rest of the banks have been performing. The BSP has said that in the second quarter, when there were all of these restrictions in terms of a strict lockdown, a survey that the BSP conducted had showed a slowdown in bank lending during that quarter. And of course, this they say is due to the less favorable economic outlook. And this is the first time that the banks had reported tighter credit standards following 44 consecutive quarters of unchanged credit standards. So despite all of this easing, you could actually see the banks being more risk averse, let's say, during the lockdown period. And finally, last touch on the earnings here, we do have Aboitiz Equity, one Conglo, so probably the first Conglo to be reporting second quarter, and that is down 63% year on year, 2 billion pesos in terms of net income. That's on the back of one-time gains that were actually lower than they had last year. So they did have a rather high base year last year. This brings their first half net income down 57% to 3 billion pesos. Aboitiz Equity trading in the red. That's at 48 pesos 95 centavos, down 0.1%. More on markets later on in the broadcast. Okay, let me scroll down and check in on other stories we're watching this Tuesday morning. Inflation will likely stay benign for the rest of the year, rather until the first quarter of 2021. This is according to the Banco Central. The central bank says slight increases in inflation would be seen once the economy recovers. Possible triggers to higher inflation, the BSP says, could be adjustments in utility rates and rising global oil and rice prices. The BSP sees domestic demand remaining weak amid the pandemic, and with this, the central bank sees inflation at the lower end of its 2 to 4% target until next year, before climbing to 3% in 2022. The BSP is now on a wait-and-see mode to determine how previous monetary actions have impacted the economy and financial markets. The Agriculture Department assures the public that the country's on-hand food supply could last until the first quarter of next year. In fact, Secretary William Dar said there will be enough rice stocks for 89 more days after 2020. Citing PSE data, Secretary William Dar said the production of palay, or unmilled rice, during the second quarter of this year rose 6.85% from last year. That's due to an increase in the harvest area. Meanwhile, for other agricultural commodities, the DA said the supply outlook is, quote, favorable. Corn stocks are estimated to be good for 237 days by the end of 2020. Chicken will be sufficient for 182 days, and vegetables will be enough for 20 more days. Due to this outlook, Dar said they will continue the implementation of the Plant program to further boost production of major food commodities, including rice, fish, major crops, poultry, and livestock. The Asian Development Bank said the government should consider extending the wage subsidy program for small firms. This comes after their survey showed that most businesses in the country are facing a cash crunch that's amid the pandemic due to, quote, sharp deterioration of financial conditions. You can see on your screens here, out of almost 2,500 surveyed firms, the ADB said only 9.3% had savings to run their businesses for over 6 months, while 33.6% of firms no longer have cash or savings to cover operation costs. 36.5% meanwhile said they might run out of working capital within 3 months. The survey also showed that micro enterprises suffered the most serious shortage of working capital, while larger companies have enough liquidity to survive for more than 6 months. Most firms surveyed said the most important payment concern is that of wages and Social Security contributions. The president's penultimate State of the Nation address left many wanting, and with businesses feeling hopeless and clamoring to understand the next steps in a long recovery. How can we make sense of the country's near term future? Here to give us his views, we have Professor Alvin, economist at the Ateneo de Manila University. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning, Danny.
Good morning, sir. Very quick reaction to the President's State of the Nation address. Was there even a roadmap to begin with? Was he able to actually deliver the roadmap to the people that were really waiting for more information and, let's say, a path to recovery?
Well, actually, the president mentioned a lot of things in the SONA that pertains to addressing the COVID impact. However, just like you said, people were looking for like a unified, organized, and a single approach to this pandemic. And unfortunately, I think that is what people were wanting on this SONA.
Okay, sir, sauna or no sauna, what is the real state of the nation? I mean, let's kick off with fiscal first. We are facing the deepest contraction we've seen in 3 decades, but may pera naman tayo, di ba, at the beginning. We actually had tax reform in 2019. According to a lot of foreign debt watchers, this reform was a very good thing for the economy. We were on the way to building the infrastructure push. And during the pandemic, the private sector even pitched in helping the disbursement. So what is going on here? Why all of this difficulty, despite the fact that we had fiscal space and the private sector had been pitching in?
Well, actually, we indeed we prior to this pandemic, we are actually really going into our in fact overstretching beyond our targets. Poverty
Mm.
targets will most have likely been met in 2021, earlier, a year earlier than what was projected, and many of the GDP targets, infra targets were on track. Unfortunately, things have gone southwide, so we don't really have an opportunity to go back there right now. The thing is, uh, we have money, but it will not be enough for all of this because remember we only collected taxes squarely until March, and then after that
Okay.
we really have a very difficult time. It's just as you reported, many of the firms are not paying taxes at this time, or are not really
Mm.
qualified even to pay taxes because they have no sales at all. So it's zero sales. So because of that, government is looking at that possibility of how do we now move and finance many of these because it requires a lot of cash. The budget, as reported by the DBM, they have already released about 90% of the 2020 budget. So the money is already out there
Okay.
among the agencies. And a lot of it has been restructured towards COVID response. But note that the Philippine budget structure has largely been, a significant portion is personnel, of course, and then you only delay capital expenditures and maintenance. So in reality, there is really going to be some cash crunch moving forward.
Sir, is this you mentioned that there was not enough cash, especially because businesses are not paying taxes, and that budget has been disbursed. You don't feel that there was a delay in the legislators actually passing this budget? President Duterte was pushing for even more special powers to be able to realign the budget for health purposes, or to stimulate the economy. So is that the bottleneck here? The lawmakers actually having to fast track this second version? And do you think that special powers are necessary right now?
Well, I guess the Bayanihan one already like allotted and allocated, and I think enough resources for health, basically to address the emergency. However, of course, that's only for addressing the emergency. But since this is a continuing challenge, then you have to keep on pouring resources to your health sector, ensuring that it will be able to face this, the challenge here and there. I think what is the president is trying to tell the people yesterday is that this is something that will not go away. Even if we have the vaccine, he even mentioned about asking China, because he understands that there's a probably going to be a queue who will going to be who are the countries who will get first the vaccine. So this now puts us into the long haul environment, and that like puts a lot of pressure into our health system to really shape to not shape up, but to increase its capacities, and to allow for more flexibility in the use of resources.
Sir, now that we've already seen what's going on, in terms of small businesses closing, we have some surveys already in terms of that. We just reported on small businesses having less than 3 months, working capital to be able to maintain. Where should the money of the Arise bill be going? So this 1.3 trillion, it's not even released yet. In theory, it's supposed to be for the recovery after the pandemic. We're still in the midst of that. But where do you think this should be going? And has the government been clear on the strategy of using those funds?
I think one of the rice bill was passed by the lower house as early as late May or early June. But there's a disagreement with the executive department, particularly the finance department, on how to finance this 1.5 trillion, because, as I said, they have already disbursed 90% of the 2020 budget, which is roughly about 4 trillion pesos. So you're now it's some sort of like doing a extra budgetary funding. Where will you get that money? I think that is the concern of the finance department. Of course, we can always go to the debt market and borrow. But I think they have already pegged that our deficit should not go beyond 9% this year, and I think that's the reason why they're only asking for about 150 to 200 billion pesos for this Bayanihan 2. So the Arise bill technically will now be I mean, with that proposal, looks like it's going to be for the next year's budget. But having said that, I mean, this is really a very challenging time for many of our particularly our ordinary people, ordinary working people, and small businesses. So uh, even if you want to you don't have enough resources, if you notice in the March call, Ateneo made a call to to the government saying that we need to spend whatever it takes, because we need to protect small businesses and workers, because the capacities that we have built over time can be lost easily. And even if, let's say, we are able to prepare for them by just giving them loans and then stopping, then how do they move for how will they move forward in such an environment? So it's really they should be the priority. The wage, the calls of the ADB, for example, to increase, to continue the wage subsidy. We support that. That the thing is, it's really, you need to find an inventive way to fund it. And I think
Okay.
it's not just funding it. The challenge also is that our capacities to disperse these resources is quite a challenge. Remember what happened to the release of the assistance to the poor families, and even in the case of Dole for the wage workers, there's some kind of challenge to release it to the actual beneficiaries.
Okay, sir, but if you do mention that your stance is it's probably not enough, we need more stimulus and we need it now, as a lot of multilateral agencies have said, we're one of the lowest percentage of stimulus compared to GDP. Would this entail additional taxes? And the lower house has actually proposed several new taxes, one on POGOs, but even one on digital tax or commerce. Is this the way to go? More tax reform to be able to fund this, or is that not already hurting an economy that's already on its knees?
Well, we really have no choice, because it's either borrowing or revenue. You have to put revenue measures. I will have no problem with revenue measures, but the effectivity date must not be during this pandemic. I mean, once things are getting better, then you can like implement these revenue measures. But at the moment, what is important is to ensure that businesses and personnel capacities are sustained, you know. And at this time, I think it will be very difficult to tax, because if you say you tax them, for example, when people heard that they wanted to tax online transactions, you see what happened, you know, the uproar of people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and all the more you are going to push people to the gray economy, which we don't want at this time. We know there is growth happening. It's not in the formal big sectors as we know it. They are moving
Okay.
towards a digital economy. So if you want to tax them, maybe give them some reprieve at the moment, because really this is not really a time for that for the meantime. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying they should not do it. I'm just saying let the people get back from the survival stages that we are facing right now, and then allow them to adjust before things are implemented.
Okay, so take our time for all of these fiscal reforms to be implemented now. It's not the time, sir. Just to close on your growth outlook, I know it's very difficult to be predicting anything right now, but you know it's such a broad range from different economists. Everyone agrees that there will be a recession this year, but some are expecting a very sharp rebound next year, above 6%, even 7% for some economists, whereas some have now started to say it's going to take 3 to 4 years to go back to that level. Um, Even so, there's still monetary policy. There's formal easing going on. They've been very quick to do that. There's a lot of liquidity, but also on the other hand, I just reported that the BSP saying that the loans have been less loans actually going on. Banks very risk averse right now. MSME saying difficulty to access that despite all of this liquidity. What's the real growth story here, and what is the reality we can expect?
Well, we will not see any growth this year. That's definite. Even if the economy is open and you allow economic activity, this is really a question of confidence. You know, many businesses have tried to open, but I mean, people are not really going out. People are not spending outside. So you really don't have the confidence for people and business to operate at this time. And that was, I think, what people were waiting for yesterday. So we want to see how we can bring back that confidence. And you're right, our own prognosis at the economics department, Ateneo Center for Economic Research, we're probably looking at about a roughly minus 5.5% uh,
Wow,
uh,
this year.
a contraction this year. In this second quarter, I forecast minus 13.8
Wow.
contraction. Yes, they are deep, but and I don't also see that we are going to have a V-shaped recovery, 6%, 7% next year. That's assuming that confidence had gone back, and that's assuming that businesses were not closing. Because if businesses have closed, then it's going to be like you're going to start all over again. And startups don't really make a lot of revenues in their operation. So it's really going to be a challenging next 2 years for the economy. But having said that, it doesn't mean that we are already. I mean, it's gone. No, it's not gone. That's why we need to make sure that the capacities and resources are protected. We need to ensure that they go through this pandemic. And what is very important right now is that the mindset, the mindset change of business and confidence and bringing back confidence in such a way that people know that we need to live with this virus and then continue. Because otherwise, if people keep on like thinking this will end, this will end, this
Pass.
will
Yeah,
end, and and,
pass.
and they are not moving on, then this is what is going to bring us and delay the economic activities. So this is really, really very challenging. And BSP has done its part. There's enough liquidity in the market, very liquid. You can see that in the way they get they bid for the treasury bills, very liquid market, and how the bonds have been snapped up very quickly. The challenge is the money needs to be trans uh, uh, transferred directly to the small workers and to the small businesses, not as loans,
Mm,
maybe as like a temporary grant, you know,
okay.
uh, a period until December probably. That would be like giving them a boost that they will be able to operate their businesses and people will still have jobs until December. At least, you know.
Okay, so very quick stimulus needed at this point, particularly for the small and medium-sized enterprises. Delay in a possible revenue increase collections, and still a very tough recovery road ahead, but not all is lost. Thank you for those insights. That was, of course, Professor Alvin Ang of the Ateneo de Manila University.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for all
Thank you,
your
sir.
what your viewers this morning.
Thank you, sir. I do want to take a very quick check on the markets because we still have a couple of earnings to break. Let's kick off with Cemex. That is, of course, our cement player, one of the biggest we have in the country, very linked to how the construction is going on here. And that was down in the second quarter, 93% to 46 million pesos. That's on the back of second quarter net sales at 4 billion pesos. The first half sales falling by 22%. They said that the domestic cement volumes decreasing by 31%, second quarter being a very challenging quarter from the company. But they did mention this from their president and CEO, Ignacio Mijares. They are seeing a gradual return of construction, seeing since the second half of May. Cemex flat now at 90 centavos. Another one to be looking out for here is Meralco. They are actually giving a full year guidance here, so not necessarily their earnings yet, but a full year guidance of 21 billion pesos. They did mention what is happening in terms of electricity is something that we want to all understand. Industrial and commercial sectors remaining very weak, even with the lockdown measures being eased. This is according to their chairman, MVP. Now, this, of course, their guidance of 21 billion is compared to what they did have as core income in 2019, 23.8 billion pesos. It's slightly lower. Now, when you talk about July, the power sales were flat when the lockdown restrictions were loosened, but they have actually shifted. The demand is now with residential users. This is according to their FVP, Victor Hedwino. Industrial sector as well is improving gradually, but still limited. And the commercial sector has yet to recover. So residential actually buoying Meralco here. Pangilinan saying the Philippine economy's swoosh recovery may be flatter and with a longer tail. And I just want to end with some positivity here because we actually do have one earnings report that is very positive, and that is the Emperador earnings at least jumping 24%. That's on the back of international demand. You can actually see it down by 1% this morning. But this, of course, was already reported yesterday. They mentioned this 24% growth in the profits was due to the continued demand for its products overseas. So their revenues had climbed 4% to 11 billion during the second quarter. Their president and CEO Winston Kos saying this is a very positive development. Recall there was a liquor ban. Despite that, customers were actually able to get Emperador products through e-commerce channels and also abroad. Despite the supply chain issues, they were actually able to take advantage of that e-commerce market there, and they had better than expected performance. So again, some positive news there. Emperador trading at 9 pesos. Very quick check on our markets here, whether we are still on that recovery decline. Actually, I have to say we have again slumped back to down 0.7%, trading at 5821.68. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Tuesday, July 28, 2020. Catch us again tomorrow morning. I'm Danie Laurel, and we are One News.